that's being executed through an actual filing. So they are going to file a class. The class code is 0012 furloughed worker class. So in that example where I had 100,000 of payroll, or my math skills would be easier to give you an example of 120,000 of payroll annually, let's say. So that's 10,000 a month. Let's say this furloughed condition is at least for 3 months. I don't, or just as an example, it's for 3 months. So that 120,000 of payroll at the $10 rate with the now the $12,000 annual premium would be overstated because 3 of those months the workers are furloughed. So the new furloughed rate for the assigned risk plan and loss cost for the voluntary market will be 0. So then the employer can then now recalculate their estimated payroll under their actual class to, in my example, to now reflect an estimated payroll of 90,000 instead of 120,000 because they have 3 months under the furloughed. So then that payroll would be associated with the new furloughed class for the number of months that they were still in this. And then the residual would be the actual class for the 90,000. So your premium, instead of being 12,000 in that example, would be 9,000. So that's just an example of, and that filing is expected to hit our doors this week, maybe today, tomorrow. I've been given the heads up earlier this week that it's going to hit our doors today or tomorrow. We'll act on it immediately. I think NCCI has already signaled out to the insurance industry that this is coming. So we will turn around the filing quickly. And the good news is that this filing will accommodate for that furloughed worker class going back to March 1. So it's intended to allow the employer to recognize that payroll at that 0 rate for that time period. So, and as most of you know, those 2 components that develop the rate are then reconciled at the end of the policy period, typically, right? They're reconciled at the end, within 90 days after your policy period. There's a premium audit, and basically says, okay, you estimated you were going to do 120 in payroll, you actually did 110. So there's a credit now, and there's 10,000 less payroll, and at that $10 rate, you'd get a $1,000 credit. It can go the other way. If the payroll is 10,000 more, then you have a debit of $1,000. So this change now will allow employers to reach out to their insurance carriers and recalculate that estimated payroll, and then in kind it will adjust their actual premium. Bear with me. I just want to make sure I hit all those points. Right. So in my example, then that premium savings would be 3,000, and the company would adjust accordingly. Now, obviously, everyone is in a different place in their policy period. So some may be about to renew with a new policy period. Those are probably the cleaner versions where you can just kind of estimate your payroll now and adjust downward what you would typically estimate based on prior year activity. But those that are already have experienced kind of that reduction in payroll and have had workers furloughed can readjust their estimated payroll and accompanying premium. So we've given this, we've put guidance out on our DFR website. So if you just simply, if you do VT DFR in Google, you're going to get to the DFR website. And there's a banner at the top of our website. And the second banner is the coronavirus banner. And it gets into a whole host of guidance. So not only for workers' comp, but for auto insurance. The department is announcing today that the auto insurance industry is going to be returning, premiums in excess of $12 million because of the fact that, by and large, there's just not the same volume of activity over the roads right now. So that's basically it in a nutshell. But I wanted to give time for folks to ask questions.
Unmute myself. I apologize for that. So yeah, we have some questions here. I'm not sure if they're specifically good questions for you. I will read them and you will tell me if this is something that you can answer or if it's something you need to wait for Ted on. Can a group of 1 or 2 workers be installing a roof while 2 finished carpenters are working inside the house on a single family home? From Jim Bradley.
Yeah, I cover a lot of things in this new environment, but that would be a little bit beyond my my wheelhouse, unfortunately.
That's what I figured.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. For everyone, I've just posted the presentation. Make sure that link works. Yes, it seems to work on the Home Builders website, homebuildersvt.com. It's the second thing from the list of red bits, so you should be able to go online and download the presentation that Kevin was just giving. Are there any questions about insurance that we can give to Kevin here?
And if there is, I'll respond. But I'll just say one more thing. In that presentation, there's a contact on the last page. There's also that link to the COVID page. But Pat Murray in our office will field questions that you have about workers' comp insurance or commercial insurance generally. She's got a lot of experience in that area. So we are encouraging folks. One thing I maybe didn't emphasize strongly enough in my presentation, but it's in there, is it's critical more than ever to keep good payroll records. So now that this new class will have this retro component back to March 1, you need to make sure you have documented payroll for this period of time and then going forward. And so, work with your agent on making sure you have the proper documentation so that he or she can advocate for you with your insurance company. But if you have any issues or questions, just generally, we're happy to help. We have offered a lot of different guidance on just premium flexibility on the part of insurance carriers, whether that's doing maybe some temporary coverage adjustments to lower your coverages or raise deductibles to temporarily kind of give you some additional premium relief. We certainly leave that up to you and your agent and company to determine what's best for you, but there are a lot of ways that the carriers are trying to offer flexibility.
Chris, may I just ask a question verbally, insurance-wise? Well, Kevin, thank you for being here. This is Jim Bradley with the Home Builders Association.
Yes, sir.
I think some questions are going to be coming up in the next several days, weeks, as we start to get back to this, I'm sure. Some of the things that I've already fielded from other builders and people who have been concerned have been, what is the exposure risk for employers once people start going back to work? I know the AGC has developed a training protocol to meet some of the governor's requirements or what the ACCD put out. And, we want to make sure that we're not opening up greater exposure from an insurance standpoint, even a legal standpoint. There's several buckets to look at here that we have to fill. And what would be your recommendations for an employer to be prudent in moving forward so that they're not exposing other workers, that they're mitigating their risk when it comes to this, the sickness, and how to handle the protocol, what training to follow? I mean, what would be your recommendation here?
I can give you some kind of broad feedback on that. Certainly the governor has provided a lot of guidance under the stay home, stay safe, and now there'll be additional guidance as these mitigation efforts are lifted. in terms of how we act outside the home now, in terms of social distancing or other safety measures. I would say the insurance carriers, obviously, they already have a loss control component in their operations that should be advising through the agent what the business owner should be doing. So I would first reach out to them, because they may have different variations of what they think is a good practice. They may even encourage the builder to actually establish something, maybe even document that there's kind of a daily kind of check-in at the start of the day, or a weekly kind of training that's going on to just reinforce whatever these adjustments to the way we typically do business. So those are always good practices to establish, and oftentimes the insurance carriers will, if they see that, they can actually offer some additional premium relief that you're taking these additional measures and documenting that. But I don't know if that helps at all.
It does. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kevin, for coming on to the call. We really appreciate it. And we'll let you get back to work. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. And thank you for all the work that your members are doing for Vermonters. I know it's an important role. Everyone's looking forward to getting back to in full swing. So we appreciate when that tight day comes.
Thank you. And Chris, I just interjected because I saw you on mute, and we have Lindsay Kurrle, the secretary. Lindsay, thank you so much at very last minute coming on.
No worries. I'm happy to try to pinch hit for Ted, but you'll have to kind of give me hey, Kevin, have to give me a little bit of an idea of what you were looking for him to speak about.
Yeah, so we were talking, so for everybody on the call, Lindsay is the secretary of ACCD, and people were having questions about the rollout, and currently they had some specific questions about what they're doing now, and then what phase 2, 3, and on out is going to look like, as well as possibly are there going to be, what training safety protocol there's going to be in place. So everybody please bear with us. This is totally off the cuff. So thanks so much.
We can do this. We can get through it.
Chris.
Yes.
So I just wanted to welcome Lindsay, and thank you very much for calling. I just want to remind people that if they log on and they have questions, please put the questions in the chat. We have a number of questions that we can get to after you give us a welcome, a hello. You don't have to stay muted, but I'm asking that other people do that to keep the noise down.
All right. Well, hopefully the activity in our house doesn't get busy and loud, but so as you may or may not know, the governor has looked to our agency. Initially it was to help guide folks with respect to complying with the executive order, and that was difficult, and you all made a lot of sacrifices, and those sacrifices are really paying off for our state. So now we're at a point where he wants to, I'm stealing his phrase, to open the spigot a quarter turn at a time. So what you saw last Friday was the first quarter turn, and that was really a conversation so when we were giving the guidance originally to ask people to potentially suspend their in-person business operations, it was very much sector by sector that we were giving the guidance, so that we were really consistent across sectors. But what we found as we started to figure out it was, we could open up, was it didn't make sense to do it by sector. It made more sense to address how people work rather than what they do for work. So the how is important, because if we can get people back working in some capacity while maintaining the level of mitigation that we've been working so hard to do, then we wanted to let some folks back to work. So in particular, in your sector, your industry, you saw the opening up of people working in twos. And you also probably noticed it was a little bit vague in terms of like, if you're outside, for example, we didn't specifically say how many groups of twos could be so far apart. We really, and inside, same thing. We ultimately updated our guidance a bit to say, you could have a couple people per unoccupied floor. But really what we're doing is asking people to figure this out. How can you do this work in twos or ones, and not, create unnecessary exposure. So it was a little bit of, let's open it up a little bit, but let's also work really safe and really smart. So that was our attempt. There's no, perfect way, but we're finding that people are doing a really good job trying to keep from putting too many people close together. Our biggest concern is just, we weren't looking to go back to business as usual, in the sense, we don't want folks congregating in the morning before they start work, or sitting together to eat lunch in big groups, stopping unnecessarily at stores and whatnot. So the idea is to keep working with the stay home as much as possible, stay safe, but let some people back to work. In terms of, you've probably heard a lot about the planning for it. So we have one action team within the governor's Economic Mitigation and Recovery Task Force that are assigned to help people draft a plan for what it will look like when they come back to work in this new normal. And our goal is for the industry or the sector to really own their plan. Now, obviously, not every, so you have the home builders, right? So you imagine if you all coordinated and said, how could we, as we open up more, how could we function with more people on the job, but do it in a way that really continues to mitigate the spread? And so the plan would be something you design and that you own. It doesn't have to be approved by the governor, but the goal, the way we've been looking at this is, we'll look at the plan and we say, okay, this looks good. This is great. You should own this plan. And we may take some of those ideas and put them into the next executive order, but we aren't necessarily going to take all of them. So there's been a little bit of confusion. I'm sure some of you have seen what AGC did. And AGC created a pretty robust plan, and that's their plan. That is their members' plan. And they are holding each other accountable to that plan. But in our executive order, we very much said, you have to follow CDC guidance, as well as guidance from the Vermont Department of Health. And then on top of it, we're gonna just highlight, we don't want more than 2 of you in a vehicle. We don't want people working within 6 feet of each other. So if you can figure out how to deliver without being, within 6 feet of each other, we want your face covered with a cloth covering. I'm missing something. Oh, if you're sick, don't come to work. So we definitely put some specifics in there, but we weren't as deep or as, what's the word? We didn't take it to the same level, let's say, as the plan that was presented to us by the AGC. So there was a little confusion because it's not that they shouldn't be doing the training that they're talking about. They've agreed to that and they should be doing it, but we, the state, are not going to come in and try to enforce that. We are working with VOSHA, and VOSHA will be creating a very general basic training plan that any employer should be able to jump onto, and it will be helpful to them. So they'll really gear it toward what we were requiring in our guidance in this latest, the latest addendum. And then as we add more, the next opening of the spigot, same thing. If we add some health and safety measures that we feel are really critical to people, being able to do this work, VOSHA will bring that into their training. So if an industry or a membership organization wants to do their own training, we're fine with that. But if they want to also jump onto the VOSHA training, there's that as well. And that will also help for all the employers who are, really don't necessarily belong to a particular member organization, or maybe they're just a little bit different than the way others do business and whatnot. So, and it's not like perfect, but it's our way. The plans that will be presented to us are definitely guiding our decision making. So they're not for nothing. They're important, but they should be something that if you're going to do that, that you can really live with and feel comfortable about embracing. I'll take a breath.
Great. That's really good information, because there's a lot of misinformation, or at least not enough information to wrap our head around the AGC and what they were doing. And it was sounding like that was an initiative that most of us were going to be asked to follow, and to, of course, that we're going to be asked to take. And it's very good, I think, and a relief to all of us to hear that it's not that top-down kind of thing. I do have a couple of questions here I'd like to throw at you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
On the chat, from James Bradley. There's a bit of repetition, so please bear with me.
Okay.
Can a group of 1 or 2 workers be installing a roof while 2 finishing carpenters are working inside the house on a single family house?
Okay, so I always caution to start giving on-the-spot guidance, but I would say that on the surface seems to be fine, because even though there's 4 people, ultimately they're, in my opinion, they're very spread out. What would be ideal is if those 4 don't start, when they take their breaks, sitting together in the same space. The bathroom situation, again, I just want to caution, depending on where people are using facilities and whatnot, that makes sure there's a lot of cleaning happening, a lot of soap, a lot of water. Again, on the surface, it sounds good. I would just say that if it doesn't feel right, or you're questioning it, then it's probably not right. But if both people that are working feel that they can safely do what they're trying to accomplish in the area, then it's probably okay.
Great. How is the state going to be handling Department of Fire Safety inspections, considering that they are not able to do inspections and will not schedule them currently? From Chris Snyder.
That is a great question. So when you say they're not able to do them, are they not able to do them even with this latest lift?
Chris, I give you permission to unmute.
It is my understanding that they have decided that they will not do any inspections, even with the new addendum to the executive order.
Okay, so I'll have to get to the bottom of that and get back to you. There's probably a really good reason, and it just wasn't on my radar.
Yeah,
I did, if I can interject, I did get from Chris Boyd kind of a self-certification document where you can have a TQP for each trade, sign off on their component, and sort of self-certify until the point comes where they can come and do an inspection later.
Oh.
I can forward that to whomever.
And who did you say that came from?
Chris Boyd, one of the fire marshals from Williston. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll try to get a little bit more on that too.
Okay, you spoke in passing about phases, and Brian has asked, when and what is phase 2 as it relates to construction sector getting back to work?
That's the big question. I don't know, to be 100% honest, I don't know what the answer is yet. Again, we've had a couple of meetings already with the health and safety folks, Dr. Levine, as well as the epidemiologist. I suspect that you're going to see it's going to open up a few more in size, but I don't have the final answer on that. I do think you'll probably hear something from the governor on that on Friday. But in the meantime, I would just continue working with the idea that you can work alone or with 2 people.
Okay, I think you already answered, Jim, if I'm right, Jim Bradley. I think we already got the answer to the question you posted on, I'll just read it, and it seems that for some reason that something wasn't covered. What's the proposed end game going to look like? Will there be an all clear given so that ultimately it can all go back to business as usual? There's been an increasing discussion regarding the possibility of the prices returning the fall of 2020, provided that our industry follows the CDC and Vermont Department of Health guidelines at this time. Would it be reasonable to expect that we could remain working should a future event occur?
Yeah. Again, I don't know that anybody's really predicting that at this point. Obviously the governor is itching to get the economy open, but there's just so much still going on around us. In particular, I'll just highlight what's happening near the Boston area. We're not out of the woods yet. So I think that we all have to be really prepared that things are going to be very different for a while. And I don't know that any one of us can say whether we'll be back to normal in the fall. Originally, somebody had mentioned that a lot of folks were imagining in the fall we would have sort of this, this spike again. And then I heard this morning on national news that maybe winter. So I just don't know if anybody really knows. But I would say we kind of have to be prepared for anything. And I would hope that if we end up back to where, we found ourselves in the middle of March, that we would pivot better, quicker, safer. And, I think we've shown if you really shut it down altogether, that you can make a pretty good impact. I say pretty good impact from a health perspective. I realize from an economic perspective, this has been terrible. But what we're seeing compared to other states is that we really went pretty strict on our shutdown, and we've been pretty lucky with the outcome so far. But let's just hope we can keep open. I feel like at a minimum, I like the fact that we can work in twos, and as I mentioned before, if somebody's doing some framing and somebody's inside painting or whatever, that's great. But so we'll just have to count our blessings right now, and hopefully we'll be more open in the coming weeks.
Great. I'm going to throw these two questions together because they seem to be pretty much the same. From that just popped me. From Brian and Steve Spatz, will there be a cost to businesses for the VOSHA training, and does the agency see the OSHA path for training workers at no cost or cost-covered training, knowing that many contractors may not be in a position to pay for any training at the time?
Absolutely. So again, having my conversation with VOSHA this morning, we very much envision a path where it would be free training that's done by VOSHA. And to the extent that folks want additional training over and above what VOSHA is offering, our workforce development director was on the call with me this morning and certainly is supportive of trying to grant training dollars out where it makes sense. So we don't want this to be more burden on any of you. And so we'll do everything we can to make sure that you have appropriate training at no cost.
Great. Okay. A bit of repetition, but I want to make sure everybody gets heard. So we can build all of a house with two people other than the foundation and the framing. What would be the provisions for these two trades that need to be a crew larger than two?
Yeah, so unfortunately, if it requires a crew larger than two to do it, right now we're asking, or the governor's directing those operations be suspended. So not ideal, I get it, but again, the goal right now, so that we could open it up a little bit and see what happens, is to do the jobs that you can do with two people or less.
So more spacing between get the foundation poured with those two people, stop, get the framers in with those two. I mean, that type of, just the staging would be different.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's great. If you can find a way to do it creatively so that it works for you, but you're also able to not have all these people on the job site, crossing paths. I mean, I don't know if you can stagger the work throughout the day, but again, we're good with that. And the key is, I'll keep reminding you, like the cleaning, the covers, and in your industry, I'm sure you wear, certain masks anyway when you do a lot of the work, but we just, it's the health and safety, trying to, again, mitigate the spread of the virus.
Okay, a crew, once again, situational, that seems to be the the question, a crew of 2 can be very inefficient in many cases if we're 2 are working 10 feet off the ground. Can a third person supply the first 2 with materials that are cut to size? It's a pretty standard.
So
crew.
same thing. I get it. It's inefficient maybe. So not every function and job type is going to work for what's allowed. And again, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I keep hoping that you'll see a little bit further turn of the spigot this week or next. Again, I can't, like, if something were to happen this week and that, you know, that could be a game changer, but for right now, currently have to figure out what you can do with 2 or less.
Okay. From Bob, our work crews require overnight lodging. New Hampshire is permitting motel stays for tradespeople who are considered workers in New Hampshire. Is there consideration to operating motels in Vermont to opening trade motels in Vermont to tradespeople?
Yeah, this is a really, really difficult question that we've spent a lot of time on. Again, I don't have an answer for what will come. Right now, we're still not, we're not opening those rooms up unless it's for essential work. So even though we've opened and allowed folks to do what was not formerly called essential work, to do some small projects, we're not ready to do the housing piece of it. So part of that is, it'll be 100% transparent here, is it arguably brings people into our state that we really don't have any control over with respect to where they've been, and, you know, just because there's some different rules going on in the different states. But again, we know that this is an issue because as we do open this up for bigger construction projects to happen, we know there's, I mean, I can think of many projects around the state that are actually even done by out-of-state companies. So it's going to come up. We're going to have to face it, but right now, still not opening those up to anything other than for serving essential workers.
Great. How long does a home have to be unoccupied for before it can be delivered? I believe that is the question. After it's finished, how long does it have to be occupied for before it's not contagious to the house itself?
I don't know. Again, the intent for this was for, you know, if it's maybe a new home that nobody lives in, as opposed to trying to say somebody that lives there has to get out while you do the work. So I don't know how long something would remain contagious. And again, I would say use your best judgment, but really, again, encouraging the work to be done on unoccupied. And I say that people aren't living there, or people aren't going to work there every day, or whatever the inside project is.
Right, and that's just the next question is exactly that. No occupied structures, correct? And Malcolm from Montpelier Construction adds, if a home is occupied but the work area is completely separate with no contact with residents, can we work there?
You know, again, I get a little anxious doing these on the spots. Maybe if there's a separate entrance, you know, maybe there's a way to enter that completely unoccupied area and work. I think, again, if the homeowner is comfortable with it, then I think you work it out between the two of you.
Okay. Is there any plan in place for access to PPE, as PPE is obviously prioritized for the healthcare industry? Is there any plan in place for access to PPE? Oh, it's just the same thing twice. Yeah.
Okay. I suspect that's a yes. I need to check with the health department on this, because I think that they were taking the lead on trying to answer that question. So I'm going to make a note of that and get back to you. Are there folks that are already feeling as though they aren't able to access it, or is it something you're anticipating?
Steve?
Well, I think it's some level in anticipation, and then also just managing expectations for people seeing workers out working with masks and other PPE on, when they may feel that equipment should be going to doctors, nurses. You know, how are we going to manage that?
Yep, that's a really great point. So I will run that up the Emergency Operations Center and see what as well as at the health department, and see what I can get back on that. Because you're right, if there's going to be a public backlash for that, I would prefer to get out in front of it and help you communicate.
Good
Sure,
question,
I just
Steve.
think in
Thank you.
general, as people are getting back to work here, managing expectations for the general public of seeing more workers out and about on job sites, and then also managing that aspect of it too. You know, making sure that there's a clear
Yeah, very good
chain of
point.
understanding down to the all Vermonters.
Yeah. Jim posted a question from another contractor. He's an owner of an LLC and still cannot get unemployment or the interim $1,200 check. The system will not let him log in since he was self-employed. Who should he contact if he's not able to get anyone from the agency on the phone, and how should he proceed?
Yeah, so if you are an independent contractor or an LLC, just as this person obviously is, the pandemic unemployment assistance program is actually being kicked off today. So there's a reason that person hasn't been able to access that money or the other unemployment insurance system or program. It's confusing, and I'm sorry for that. I recognize that those of us who live in it, it's probably pretty clear, but those who don't have experience with either being on an unemployment insurance benefit or this is new time, this is uncharted territory. So I think, again, we need to communicate it a little bit better, but for that person, they should start trying today to apply. Go to the Vermont Department of Labor website. There are many phone numbers that are available there to try. And at the risk of having my own email blow up, if one of you has a connection with somebody who's really, really struggling, I hate to, just throw it out there, but I would say if you're desperate, you could maybe email me, but please see if they can try to work through labor first. I don't have any levers to pull specifically, other than I am really good at accumulating what problems are and then telling them what the general challenge is. So yeah.
So to give them
Patty,
a little
I can
peace
tell
of
Patty's
mind.
like, don't do it.
Yeah. Great.
I just want to help. It's really scary. It's really, really scary to people. And I want to make sure folks feel like they're being helped.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. There are two questions that are kind of also about the similar. From Dennis, how should we handle job sites that are not following guidelines? They reported in order to not hurt the rest of the industry due to non-compliance. And a similar question from Todd, what is the enforcement mechanism guidelines? While we are following guidelines, many are not.
Yeah, so I mean, this is where it gets pretty challenging. So our hope is that folks will comply. We know from past experience that sometimes there's non-compliance because somebody really doesn't care, and sometimes there's non-compliance because people just don't have the right information. So if you're comfortable, if you see somebody that you think is putting people at risk or arguably putting you all at risk of having to go backwards, and you're comfortable speaking up, feel free to just say, are you aware? And if you're not, then there's an email that you can send to our agency. It's commerce.covid19, the number 19, at vermont.gov. And you can certainly send something into us, letting us know what the concern is, and we can try to, do more education, or if need be, send it over to public safety for a little bit of assistance. Right now, again, the enforcement mechanisms are, obviously, if folks are out of compliance with things that are required by OSHA or VOSHA, there's that enforcement there. But in terms of pandemic-related items that haven't even necessarily been rolled out by OSHA, if we as the state are asking people to comply, we're going to try to, again, do education first before we send. In the past, you've probably heard where we had some non-compliance with the with the stay home, stay safe order, and we just had local law enforcement drive by, and it wasn't to intimidate or anything. The goal was to really let people know, you know, first, or learn, you know, what are you doing? What are you working on? And are you aware of this? So we can always go to bigger enforcements, but we're trying to keep that down.
We appreciate that, because we'd all like to be able to handle these things as low intensity as possible. One final question I'm getting from Jim: will there be any type of public outreach to ensure that people know that we are able to work again as we move forward, so that we will not be harassed, I assume, just to fill it in, for being out there working?
Yeah, so we've tried to, you know, get the word out there and communicate. We also, you know, the governor is having, every other day is having press conferences and trying to be very vocal about what's been allowed. But we'll do everything we can. Hopefully the media will help us get that word out for you, but just be prepared. There may be people that are scared and anxious. I keep reminding myself that everybody manages this situation really differently. And sometimes people, it comes out in ways that are, you know, very unfortunate, the anger. And, you know, if to the extent you're willing to try to diffuse with politeness to start, would be my first piece of advice to you. But again, if you're finding that you're getting a hard time, let us know at the agency, because we have a pretty broad ability to communicate around the state. We've taken our entire tourism and marketing department, who spends their time regularly letting people outside the state know how wonderful our state is and to come here. We've taken all of their efforts, the money, the energy, and turned it inward to try to communicate with Vermonters. So we'll do everything we can to try to get that word out.
Great. Colin says, thank you very much for your time and your common sense approach, and thank you for working for our industry and Vermonters. It's been very helpful having you on, and thank you very much for jumping in at such short notice, and also for, you know, putting yourself out there by saying we can, if we have someone who's got a horrible problem, send you directly information. Although we will ask people to try to get through the actual state. There's someone who's trying to get in. I'm sorry. Barring any other questions, I would like to thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for being on and giving us the questions that we could ask Lindsay and get great answers. I have recorded this. I didn't let everybody know at the beginning, but I was asked to record it. So we'll be putting this together and posting it on our website, so that our members who are unable to attend, or other members of our industry who want to, can get a listen to it. We'll also put some minutes up from the answers we got from the questions. Malcolm, is there something I've got going on here? Malcolm has his hand up. I've never seen that before. That's cool. What, Malcolm? Did you mean to raise your hand? No.
I think he's muted.
He is, but he can unmute himself. I'm not forcibly. Malcolm.
Sorry. I was just wondering if anybody had gotten their EIDL, the $10,000 loan. It's really a grant.
Yeah.
Anybody have any luck on that?
I did apply, but I have not received anything. I'm pretty sure everybody who's on did apply for that. But
you know, I would like to offer, Lindsay, thank you for offering your email. And the reason I was saying no, because Lindsay's got a certain job, and that's a SBA and a DOL. Those are DOL and SBA issues. And we can have another one of these meetings with those people on it. And I just want Lindsay to have capacity to do the work she has.
Yeah,
also,
thank you.
Questions can be filtered through VBRA, and we can try and figure out how to help people. But yeah, so I wasn't shutting people up with their problems, but Lindsay.
No, and I didn't, I agree, Patty. I was thinking as I was doing it, like, I just opened the door again for a whole bunch of emails, but at the same time, I really do, I feel very good about the fact that we are in a state where people can reach out and get help from one another. So I don't mind it. This is my job, and I will help. But sure, if people can try to you know, as you mentioned, divert the questions first to labor. And then if I don't want anybody at their wit's end feeling, you know, completely overwhelmed. And I know there's a lot of that right now. So I'm happy to help. And I appreciate you all, you know, letting me jump on, kind of coming in, not knowing exactly what we were talking about, but I hope I've answered questions. And if you think of others, again, reach out to me and we'll try to walk you through it.
Thank you.
Great.
Awesome.
I have two more bits here that just jumped in. W. Fontaine was late in. Is it feasible to work wearing masks when outside of social distance is not feasible? For example, installing windows from aerial lift. Thank you, from Will. He wasn't on, so I didn't hear your earlier answers.
Okay, so if you're working in a group of 2 or less, the goal is to try to keep you 6 feet apart. But if the actual function that you're doing requires you to come together, the 2 of you, then again, so long as you have masks, you're doing a lot of proper cleaning and nobody's feeling sick, it's okay if you're coming in contact, but you shouldn't have more than 2 people. So if it takes more than 2 people to safely do a function, it needs to wait right now.
Okay, and finally, and I'll just call this the last question. Chris Snyder, do you recommend that companies should be submitting guidance information for specific items still, or would you prefer to get our questions answered in another way?
So if it's questions about like some of these, like certain situations and you're trying to understand whether you should be operating, we have, again, the email that I mentioned is
commerce.covid19@vermont.gov. I'll post it again. I put it in the chat so that everybody can get it.
I'm just double checking it. Yep, commerce.covid19@vermont.gov. And the other thing is, if you go to our website, when you're looking for the guidance, there's definitely a link to click on where it says, I think it says like request additional guidance. And that goes to that same team that will literally read through, vet it, try to help you get your answers.
And I will post that here as well. That is, ACCD Vermont.gov, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me post that in here as well. So that's the website.
There's a lot of good information on there too. If you haven't been on, there's a lot of information about applying for like financial assistance, like loans, grants. You know, I know right now we ran out, when I say we, the federal government, the programs, Vermont was able to secure $1 billion of that $342 billion, but as you all know, it was not enough. And so there's round 2 hopefully coming. The Senate signed that bill. So again, be ready, because as soon as they launch it, you want to get in, and if you haven't applied already, apply. But also if you're LLC or independent contractor, if you go onto our page, you'll find a link for helping individuals, and it will take you to where you need to apply for the pandemic unemployment assistance.
Resources for individuals. Yeah, the website, I'm on it right now. It's very clear. Ask a question, stay informed, resources for business, individuals, and communities. I think it looks really good, and it pops you right where you need to be.
Yep.
Okay, we're at the end of this meeting. Lindsay, again, thank you very much for taking your time out to help us with this, and everyone else. We will be posting, take these links, but we'll be posting the video later today. If you know someone who is interested in that, who is unable to participate, please let them know that will be available. We'll also be sending out an email from the association with that information.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. And you all have a good, safe day. And let's hope that things keep on going in the direction that we can all get back to normal as soon as possible.
I agree.
Great.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye.